Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in on something I think touches all of us, really.
Mm-hmm.
How easily we can get tangled up in our own thoughts. And maybe surprisingly, the downsides of feeling, a bit too confident too soon.
Yeah, that early pride thing.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We've pulled together a really interesting mix of sources for this one. Classic books, history, some enduring wisdom.
Good spread.
Our goal, like always, is to cut through the noise, find those core insights, those aha moments
Yeah.
you can actually use, without feeling buried.
Right. And it feels like two sides of a similar coin, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, first, there's that feeling of being trapped in your own head, where, like Alan Watts put it so well, your thoughts become the main event.
And you lose touch with reality.
You lose touch. Yeah, you end up in this world of illusions. And then the other side, the danger, sometimes subtle, of what we're calling early pride.
Something thinkers have warned about for ages.
Absolutely. For centuries.
Okay. And for everyone listening, if you value gaining knowledge and you like those moments where things just click,
Those aha moments.
yeah, then this should offer a really valuable lens. We're exploring these internal roadblocks, getting stuck up here, premature pride, how they can, hinder progress.
And connection, too. Real connection with the world.
Definitely. Okay, let's dive in. First up, the trap of overthinking.
Good starting point.
And what better launchpad than Alan Watts?
Mm-hmm.
A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts.
So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. It really hits home, that quote.
It does. It points to this, self-feeding loop, right?
Yeah, a cycle. Your thoughts become primary, like a hall of mirrors just reflecting you, and you kind of lose the connection to what's actually out there.
And the literary examples you pull together, they really bring this out.
Oh, absolutely. They're quite vivid.
Take Holden Caulfield. Catcher in the Rye. He's just constantly analyzing, judging.
Yeah.
He can't just be there, can he?
No, he's completely caught up in his own internal critique. Always dissecting, never just experiencing.
And then Arturo Bandini in Ask the Dust.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's not living life, he's curating it.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. He's framing everything as material for his writing. Is this moment tragic? Am I the misunderstood genius here? It's all filtered.
Filtering reality. And Binx Bowling, the moviegoer. He's so into the movies.
Right, the idealized screen life makes his own life feel, pale, unsatisfying.
Yeah, like he's living in the shadow of some better fictional world.
And what's really telling, as the sources point out, is these aren't just random characters. There's a lot of autobiography baked in.
Right, Salinger's own isolation seems very Holden-like.
Totally. And John Fante, like Bandini, definitely wrestled with his ego versus, not being famous for a long time.
And Walker Percy. Binx's searching feels like Percy's own journey.
It emerged right after Percy's own kind of long existential crisis, yeah. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
About what they could have achieved.
Yeah, what more they might have done, or maybe how much smoother things could have been if they'd managed to quiet that internal noise a bit earlier.
It's a fascinating thought. That potential may be stifled by the internal chatter. It kind of reminds me of Plato.
Oh, how so?
His idea about people feasting on their own thoughts. He talked about avoiding the actual work by just, daydreaming about success.
Ah, right. Getting lost in the fantasy of having already achieved it.
Yeah, they mentally rehearse the victory speech, imagine the praise, and their lazy souls become even lazier, as he put it. That gap between the fantasy and the actual doing.
Precisely. And we see a really powerful, almost cautionary tale in the real world with General George McClellan during the Civil War.
McClellan.
Right.
On paper, he looked perfect.
Absolutely. West Point grad, battle experience, military scholar, even look the part. He ticked all the boxes, you'd think.
Yet the sources say he was maybe one of the least effective Union generals. Why?
Right.
What was that disconnect?
Well, it seems he was just profoundly trapped inside his own vision of himself.
As the brilliant strategist.
Exactly. So in love with the idea of leading this perfect, magnificent army, that when it came to the messy reality of fighting, he hesitated. He froze.
He could organize, but not act.
He was brilliant at organizing and equipping, but decisive engagement, he consistently pulled back. And what's fascinating is how his internal story totally warped his view of the battlefield.
He thought the enemy was stronger than they were.
Constantly. Convinced the Confederates were always growing stronger, even when he had way more troops, he saw political plots everywhere, chasing this impossible perfect plan.
Which led to paralysis.
Crippling inaction. Meanwhile, you had Lee and Stonewall Jackson with fewer resources, fewer men, just running circles around him, taking the initiative.
Wow, it really shows how being stuck in your head can detach you from reality.
Completely. It's a stark example.
It's almost like his planning prevented him from acting. Which brings us to Anne Lamott's station KFKD analogy.
Ah, yes, that constant internal broadcast.
That 247 noise in our heads. One channel telling you you're brilliant, the next whispering you're a total fraud.
And the crucial thing is, whether it's praise or blame playing on that station, it's incredibly distracting. It's debilitating.
The source says it builds a barrier.
A barrier between us and the actual information we need. McClellan, for instance, seemed to just grab onto reports, even flawed ones, that confirmed his bias about the enemy's strength.
He couldn't see simpler options.
It seemed like the idea of a straightforward victory was almost too simple for someone living in such a complex internal world.
And this isn't just historical generals or characters, right?
Mhm.
The source connects it to the imaginary audience idea from when we're teenagers,
Yes. That feeling that everyone is watching and judging your every move.
even though they're probably just worried about themselves.
Exactly. And that self-consciousness doesn't always disappear. It lingers, maybe more subtly, in adulthood.
Like the example of walking down the street with headphones.
Right. Suddenly you've got this internal movie soundtrack going. You maybe adjust your posture, feel kind of cool for a second, or you mentally rehearse a meeting, seeing yourself nail it.
It feels good maybe, but
But it keeps you tethered to your internal world. You're not fully present. You're not really participating in what's actually happening around you. It's like watching the trailer instead of living the movie.
so what do we do about it? What's the antidote to all this noise, these flights of fancy?
Well, the suggestion is to consciously curb those things, those temptations to puff ourselves up or warp our view.
Like General Marshall.
Yeah, that's a fantastic contrast to McClellan. George C. Marshall deliberately chose not to keep a diary during World War II.
Why not? Seems counterintuitive.
His reason was fascinating. He worried that writing privately could become a kind of performance for his future self, and that could subtly bias his decisions in the present.
Wow. Avoiding performative thinking. That's insightful.
Incredibly. And this struggle, it's universal, isn't it? The source makes that clear.
Yeah, entrepreneurs, corporate climbers.
People falling in love, even. That imagination running wild without being grounded in reality. It's dangerous.
How can you predict things accurately or be creative practically if you're lost in your own head?
You can't. Not effectively. It
Wow.
really comes down to cultivating that ability to be present.
Engaging with the tangible, the now, even if it's uncomfortable.
Even if it's less fun than the fantasy, that reminder there's no one to perform for. It's simple, but deep.
There's just the work, the challenges, the now.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the trap of being stuck in our heads. Let's shift now to the other side of that coin, the perils of early pride.
Right. Equally tricky territory.
And C.S. Lewis kicks us off powerfully here. A proud man is always looking down on things and people.
And of course, as long as you are looking down, you cannot see something that is above you. It just perfectly captures how pride limits your view.
Blinds you, really. You position yourself as superior, and you miss chances to grow, to learn.
To even just connect. And that story about young Benjamin Franklin is such a perfect illustration.
Oh yeah, the Boston story. Teenage Franklin, back from Philly, feeling pretty good about himself.
Got the new suit, the watch, money jingling,
Definitely trying to impress, especially his brother. Then he meets Cotton Mather.
the respected clergyman. And as Franklin's leaving Mather's house,
Mather shouts, "Stoop! Stoop!"
and Franklin, caught up in himself, bangs his head on a low beam. Literally.
And Mather's comment afterwards is just gold. Let this be a caution. Stoop, young man. Stoop as you go through this world, and you'll miss many hard thumps.
Such a simple physical lesson about a much deeper truth, isn't it?
And the sources look at pride from different angles, right? Religious and secular.
Yeah. Religiously, it's often seen as a core sin, something deceptive that messes up our self-perception and our connection to, well, everything bigger than us.
And others.
And others, definitely. But even just pragmatically, like, for your career, pride is flagged as a huge obstacle. Clouds judgment slows you down.
Even if it comes from real accomplishment.
Especially then sometimes. It's like a subtle self-sabotage.
And there are those really stark warnings about getting success too early.
Oh, yeah. Cyril Connolly's line, whom the gods wish to destroy, they first call promising. That's chilling.
It really is. And an ancient Greek poet, Theognis, said something similar.
Pretty much, yeah. That the gods often give pride to people they plan to ruin. It makes you think twice about being labeled as having potential, doesn't it?
If you let it go to your head too soon.
Exactly. Because pride, the texts argue, seems to dull the very things you need to keep succeeding.
Like what?
Curiosity, learning from mistakes, adapting, being flexible, building good relationships, all the essentials.
And that's especially dangerous early on.
Yeah, when you have the most to learn and the weakest foundation, that first bump on the head, like Franklin's, is often just the start if pride takes hold.
And pride makes small wins feel huge in our heads.
It magnifies them, yeah. Whispers about how brilliant you are, how this is just the beginning. It creates this gap.
Between the inflated self-image and maybe the less glamorous reality.
Precisely. And it can lead to having really strong opinions that aren't actually based on much solid fact or achievement.
The source gave examples like, I'm an entrepreneur because I started my own thing.
Right, or I'm going to win because I'm ahead right now.
Yeah,
That kind of premature self-labeling, we probably all do it sometimes.
sure. But all those sayings, don't count your chickens.
Exactly, they warn against it. That premature confidence, the text calls it, pretty bluntly, fraud.
Fraud, wow.
Yeah, the idea being, if you're truly focused on the hard work, you don't need to boast like that.
Interesting. And it's not always about loud boasting, is it? The John D. Rockefeller example is fascinating.
It really is. Even as he was getting incredibly successful incredibly early, he was hyper-vigilant about his ego.
The nightly self-talks.
Yeah.
The diary entries.
Yeah, literally reminding himself, look out or you will lose your head, go steady.
Even though he did have that one boastful moment early on, telling the bank guy he'd be the richest man.
Which he actually became, amazingly. But even then, he seemed to recognize the danger in that arrogance. He saw so many others make big boasts and then fizzle out.
Because pride alienated people, clouded judgment.
Both. Led to bad decisions. He had this genuine horror, the source calls it, of arrogance.
He saw how a little temporary success could just spoil someone.
Yeah, warp their judgment, make them forget what he truly was. He saw pride as this kind of self-blinding thing. An onanistic obsession was the phrase used.
That distorts perspective, like the Little Prince reference.
Oh, the vain man who only hears praise. Yes, it's perfect. Pride creates this echo chamber where only reinforcing information gets in.
And that just kills learning, right? And self-awareness.
Absolutely. It dulls your senses to new ideas, makes you super sensitive to criticism, even helpful feedback. Everything becomes about you and your status.
Genghis Khan's warnings, too. Pride harder to beat than a lion.
Powerful image, isn't it? And the other one, even the tallest mountain has something higher above it, a constant reminder. There's always more to learn. Humility is key.
So it's not just guarding against negativity. We need to watch out for that internal validation, too. Feeling too good.
Exactly. That seductive feeling. We need to, as the text says, kill pride early, before it digs in and undermines things.
Flannery O'Connor's quote fits here. The first product of self-knowledge is humility.
Beautifully put. Honest self-knowledge is the weapon against ego.
So when we feel that pride bubbling up, what should we ask ourselves?
The crucial questions seem to be, what am I missing right now that a more humble person might see?
Ooh, good one.
And what truths am I maybe avoiding because of how I see myself right now?
Asking those early when the stakes are lower.
Yeah, can save you a lot of trouble down the road, offers huge insights.
And pride can be quiet too, right? Not just loud arrogance.
That's such an important point the source makes. Someone can seem quiet, unassuming, but still hold this dangerous internal sense of superiority.
Montaigne's inscription, quoting Menander, that on which you so pride yourself will be your ruin.
You who think yourself to be someone. A potent warning against even that hidden pride.
So the focus needs to be on the striving, the journey, not just the current win.
Exactly. Ongoing growth, development, not just freezing on one accomplishment. Pride makes your self-concept static, but reality requires constant learning, adapting.
Like Franklin, he battled pride his whole life after that beam incident.
And look what he achieved, arguably because he kept that check on himself, avoiding the misfortunes brought upon people by their carrying their heads too high.
So the ultimate message on pride is pretty simple.
Very direct. Don't boast. There's just nothing to be gained. Zero upside, really.
Okay, so we've dug into getting lost in our thoughts and the dangers of early pride. Two really intertwined challenges. Let's pull it together.
Sounds good. We've seen how getting trapped in our heads distorts reality, makes us miss things, leads to inaction.
Hinders progress. And then early pride, tempting as it feels, acts like a barrier.
Blinds us to other views, hurts growth, relationships, future success.
So for you listening, seeking those aha moments.
Mm,
Just recognizing these tendencies is the first step, right?
absolutely. Knowing about them lets you start navigating them consciously.
Working towards being more grounded, more humble, which leads to better decisions.
Better decisions, more authentic connections, more meaningful progress in whatever you're doing.
Okay, so here's a final thought to maybe chew on.
Mm-hmm.
Consider, subtly,
Mm-hmm.
is that station KFKD playing in your head sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
Or where might a little bit of early pride be? Coloring how you see things or what you do?
Good question. Just a little self-check.
Yeah. And what's one small adjustment, maybe just for today, you could make to step more into the present? Approach things with a bit more humility, a more open mind.